Today we're going to be ranking each Premier League club's most expensive summer signings start to the season because, you know, we are 6 games in already. Now, I've tried my best with the fees. Obviously, some of them aren't going to be perfect. Different sources, different fees. But I've got 20 players in front of me. I've got 5 different categories. Oh, yes. Unbelievable start to the season. Someone who started well, someone who's done okay, slow start. And there's reasons to be worried about this one. They're in a totally random order. Up first, we've got Big Dom Solanke, who cost over £60 million, comfortably Tottenham's most expensive signing of the summer. At the start of the season, he was absolutely taking heat. Let's have it right. I was listening to national news stations on the radio talk about him being a failure of a signing after 180 minutes of football. It was ridiculous. And obviously that came off the back of missing a couple of good chances on the opening day, picking up that injury, question marks over Ange. I think those question marks were ridiculous, as I spoke about on previous videos. And I think the question marks about Solanke have been fairly ridiculous as well. Yes, the fee is quite large for Tottenham Hotspur, but 4 goals in his first 7 games, scored again against Manchester United. He destroys us every time he plays us, but it's not just his goal scoring numbers that have been fine. His off-the-ball numbers have been exceptional. Some of the highest pressures per 90 of any striker in the league. He's completely changed how Ange Postecoglou sets up his forwards in an off-the-ball structure. He is brilliant. I really, really like Solanke. He's been fine at the start of the season in terms of his goal-scoring output. His underlying numbers look as solid as ever. He gets in great positions to score goals. Yes, he's missed a couple of easy chances. I think it's been a good start. Honestly, I think the chat about Tottenham and particularly Solanke at the start of the season was quite frankly ridiculous. Let's go to Andre, who has started 3 games for Wolves. Kind of looks like their best player other than Cunha already, which is a really, really big positive given that he cost over £20 million. I like him on the ball. He's very neat and tidy in his work. A 95% pass accuracy across his Premier League minutes so far this season speaks to a player that's very comfortable on the ball, keeps it very simple. But he is in a slightly dysfunctional Wolves team. I don't think he's going to sort of blow everybody out the water, but I think from a Wolves fan perspective, he looks really, really impressive. Particularly against Liverpool in that first 45 minutes, was one of the best players on the pitch. For me, he's done okay. Federico Chiesa? Now, I mean, £12 million, there's no real downside to this. The reason I'm going to put him in worried is he's got a really bad history of injuries. We saw that during his time in Italy, particularly following on from that major knee problem. He's arrived at Liverpool, he's already injured. Now, I'm not saying that that is a detrimental injury he suffered, but is that just a sign of things to come? That he is now going to be a bit of an injury-plagued player? Fingers crossed he's not, because he's a lovely football to watch when he's fit, but that is a slight worry for me. Igor Thiago was Brentford's record signing, of course, came in to replace Ivan Toney, damaged his meniscus on his debut, he's out for the entirety of 2024. I suppose you have to put it in the bottom tier. I'm not really worried because I haven't seen him play any football in the Premier League, but I suppose from an injury perspective, like Chiesa, it's a bit of a concern. It's just a shame, isn't it? We all wanted to see Igor Thiago come in after that excellent season last year at Club Brugge. Scored plenty of goals there. I was expecting big things from a front line that contained him and Burmo and Wissa. We've already got him and Wissa injured. That's a shame. Next up, we've got Chelsea spending €60 million on Pedro Neto. Now, I spoke about Andre and I put him in done okay. I think contextually in that Wolves midfield, he's looked like one of their better players. Pedro Neto has started a similar amount of minutes, but I don't feel like he's got a nailed down spot in that first team, which I was kind of expecting him to have immediately. So for that reason, it has been a slight slow start. Now, that's not necessarily his fault. I think people were expecting him to maybe play on the right. Madueke was even potentially going to leave the club during the summer, wasn't he? But he started the season on fire. The hat-trick, of course, away at Wolves. Some of his all-round play. He's got 5 goals in all competitions. Made the right-hand spot kind of his. On the left, Jadon Sancho has come in from Manchester United, 3 assists already, looks very comfortable and kind of suits how Maresca wants to play. Links really nicely with a striker like Nicholas Jackson. He's obviously not going to be able to start in the 10 slot, so it feels like at the moment we're talking about a player that's going to have impacts from the bench, like Nkunku, like Joao Felix. In the long run, I kind of expect Pedro Neto to start on that right-hand side where Madueke is. I think that's probably where he did his best work for Wolves. And it's no bad thing if his minutes are slightly limited at the start of this campaign. Only once in his Premier League career has he put up over 2,000 minutes. That was in 2020. Subsequent to that, I think the maximum he's put up was last season's 1,500 minutes. He's had major injury problems. Quite a few of them have been impact injuries. But if his minutes have to be limited in order to conserve his fitness for later in the campaign to prevent injuries, that's absolutely fine. It's been a little bit slow, but I don't have a massive problem with that. Let's go to Leicester, who spent £25 million on Oliver Skipp, their most expensive summer signing. I'm a little bit worried about this one too. Of course, Leicester have the worst expected goals against now. They have had some tough fixtures at the start of the season, but I'm still not convinced about the midfield structure. Feels like Wilfred Ndidi is playing in the 10. I think he's put up, some of the best chance creation numbers of any player in that Leicester squad, if not the best. He's also putting up some of the best defensive numbers of anybody in that squad. Over 4 tackle interceptions. Against Arsenal alone, he was competing in 10 duels. I think he won 6 of them. So when you're asking him to do that much from the 10, Winks and Skipp have to provide more in the deep-lying role. Because him and Winks are quite similar. Take, for instance, the game against Arsenal, where, of course, they are going to be under the cosh for large parts of the game. You're expecting them to put up big duel numbers. Wilfred Ndidi put up 10, for instance. Those two managed 2 attempted duels each. Won none of them. I think they have to do a little bit better off the ball in terms of their work rate and their defensive ability, but can they? Because at the moment, Hermansen has faced 114 shots in 6 Premier League games, by far and away the most in the league. 36 shots they shipped against Arsenal. Can you play a midfield 2 of Skipp and Winks? It's tough, and I think it's worrying for Leicester fans already. Let's go to Nottingham Forest, who signed Elliot Anderson. What fee did I have down here? £35 million, but of course that included Vlachodimos going to Newcastle for about £20 million. So this was actually £15 million, but I'm going to take into account the upfront fee. And there's no doubt he has had a really good start to life at Nottingham Forest. I think he's been partially helped, as sad as it is, by that Danilo injury. I don't think he was going to be a nailed-on starter until that happened. He has now assumed that role. He started all 5 games subsequently and has got that position locked down. He looks excellent. Behind their sort of creative 3, if you like, of Callum Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White, Anthony Elanga, he's put up the most chances in the squad. He's also putting up the most tackles and interceptions of any player in the squad per 90, the most pressures of any player in the squad per 90, the most carries of any player in the squad per 90. He's been absolutely everywhere. He's worked like a dog. Nottingham Forest off the ball were excellent last season. I think 6th by expected goals conceded. They're even better this season under Nuno. He's part of the reason for that. When Songare comes back, I really like that as a midfield duo. I like him alongside James Ward-Prowse too. There's lots of options in there, but it feels like he's the go-to man in midfield right now. Next up, we've got Ipswich, and on paper it is Amari Hutchinson, but I'm discounting players that were there on loan last season, like Hutchinson. So the second most expensive player was £20 million on Liam Delap, who I'm putting him in, oh yes. Could he have done any more at the start of this season, Liam Delap? He looks unreal. Now, you've got to contextualise a lot of these signings against the clubs they're playing for, haven't you? For instance, Solanke, score goals, but they create loads of chances. Elliot Anderson in a midfield that was already pretty functional under Nuno. Liam Delap playing in a new league in the Premier League for a club that aren't traditionally a Premier League club, under a manager who's never coached in the Premier League, scoring 3 goals in 6 games, including the quality of goals he's scoring. You have to have him in, oh yes. Because we're seeing what we saw for the Manchester City youth teams in the Premier League. At whole last season it was 8 goals. Fine. A fine return. In the Manchester City youth teams, when you think of what Liam Delap was best at, those driving runs from deep, being able to use his excellent physicality to knock players off the ball, but go past them with his pace and finish. He was so dominant at the Manchester City youth level. Now, it feels like he's doing that in the Premier League. I know that the defending was really poor from Aston Villa at the weekend, but the body shift, the carry distance required, the finish on his left foot, the finish on his right foot earlier in the season from range, quality of finishing, variance of finishing, physical hold-up play, great first touch. It felt like a punt at £20 million, but it feels like it's paid off massively already. If he can get into double figures at 21 years old playing for Ipswich in the Premier League, it's a remarkable campaign. So far, of all the players we've gone through on this list, I think he has had the biggest impact on his team. Next up, we've got Manchester United. Now, this could have been Lenny Yoro, but the fee was spread out over a period of time, wasn't it? And Ugarte's was a bit more up front. It was very close. I've ended up going for Ugarte. There's a little bit more to talk about there. Now, first and foremost, he started one Premier League game. So let's just take everything with a pinch of salt. There was absolutely no need to panic. And the panic online about Ugarte, some of the narrative and some of the hate he's received has been bordering on ridiculous. This is a player who didn't really have any preseason because of his work with Uruguay at the Copa America. He's come into a new league, to a new team, a language he doesn't really speak, doesn't know any of the players, and quite frankly, the Manchester United midfield setup is ridiculous. It exposed Casemiro, it will expose Ugarte, it will expose any midfielder that gets placed into that role. I'm absolutely convinced of it. So I think the worrying signs for him are almost how he fits into the side alongside Kobbie Mainoo. Kobbie is doing excellent defensive work this season. He's being asked to play a little bit deeper. He's putting up massive interception numbers, but I don't think that suits his game. Kobbie is much better higher up the pitch when he can work, be involved in attacks, dribble past players, get shots off from the edge of the area, and Ugarte needs to facilitate that. To facilitate that, he has to be able to pick the ball up deep and get on and dictate the game. Can he do that? There are concerns. There were concerns before he was signed about that. But I think he needs some time. Like, you have to put him worried because he's only started one Premier League game. Man United got whipped by Tottenham Hotspur. James Maddison ran him all over the pitch. But it's so early in his career that some of the hate he's got actually annoyed me at the weekend. Let's go to club record signing at Bournemouth. Evanilson, who got his first goal at the weekend in the South Coast derby against Southampton. Took it really nicely, didn't he? That ball dropping over his shoulder to finish across his body. And he's actually created some really good chances for himself this season. He's very, very unselfish with his work rate off the ball. An excellent channel runner. Does remind you, when you watch him, a little bit of Dominic Solanke, I think, because of his pressure numbers and his ability to get good shots off from good areas. And he's working at, what, 0.6 expected goals per 90 so far in the Premier League? That would be absolutely fine, wouldn't it? If those numbers continue, he will score over 10 Premier League goals. He's done okay. Let's go to Fulham, who have been probably my surprise package in the league so far this season. I was really concerned about them coming into this campaign, having lost Joao Palhinha, having lost Willian, having lost Tosin Adarabioyo. But they look even better as a unit in midfield. Andreas Pereira has put up the most chances of any player in the league so far this season. Of course, a lot of those do come from set pieces, but so do Bukayo Saka's. Overall, the balance looks great, and I think Emile Smith-Rowe is a big part of that. His functionality and work with Alex Iwobi on that left-hand side is so fun to watch because they're both so techie. They both want the ball in tight spaces, little flicks around the corner. That's a lot of fun if you're a Fulham fan. And that fun is actually coming in the form of output as well for Smith-Rowe. 3 goal involvements in his first 6 Fulham Premier League appearances. That's more than either of his last 2 campaigns at Arsenal. It looks like he's going to score goals for fun in this setup. Coming in from that left-hand half space, opening his body up. He's so dangerous in and around those positions. If he can stay fit, he's in for a big season. I was slightly worried about this signing, mainly because of the fitness record, but you cannot deny it's bordering on oh yes. I'm putting it up there just because he's one of the funnest players in the league to watch from my perspective. Next up, we've got Jake O'Brien at Everton. Now, they spent over £20 million on him, just more than they did on Ilian Mdai. I think you have to put him in worried. The reason for that, if we're honest, is that Sean Dyche still favours Michael Keane over him. Now, we saw it the weekend with the return of Jared Branthwaite. That partnership with James Tarkowski is easily the best of the club. It's the reason that they had such a good defensive record last season, and it will be the starting pairing this campaign. With those two at the heart of their defence last season, they put up the 4th best defensive record in the league when those two were on the field. But when they're not on the field, for instance, the best player in the whole side gets taken out of the team, like Jared Branthwaite did, Michael Keane is the guy who's getting utilised alongside James Tarkowski. Made some quite glaring errors, and I felt really struggled across his 5 starts. Jake O'Brien still didn't get a chance. Now, does that mean that going forward, Michael Keane is very much still the 3rd choice centre-back? If that's the case, what does that mean for Jake O'Brien, who, of course, got Lyon and helped Lyon get European football last season? At 23 years old, I'm sure he was expecting to be starting a consistent number of games in this Everton side, and I struggled to see where they come from. Let's go to Savinho. By the way, when did this change? If there's anybody in the comments that can let me know, when did he go from Savio to Savinho? Is that a thing that happened over the summer? But he was Manchester City's most expensive arrival. Even that fee wasn't that big because, of course, he was signed from a sister club. Yeah, it's been a good start. Yet to score a goal, but, you know, putting up huge shot-creating numbers. I think the most shot-creating actions of any Manchester City player per 90, more than a player like Kevin De Bruyne so far this season. Constantly involved in link-up and build-up play. I feel like his end product looks a little bit sharper than Jeremy Doku already. I think the touch and ball for Haaland against Arsenal in particular was something I wouldn't necessarily associate with a player like Jeremy Doku, but I immediately already do with Savinho, which is a huge benefit. And I think what's most interesting for me is how does Pep fit all these players in when Phil Foden starts to be a starter? Because at the beginning of this campaign, he hasn't started a Premier League game. We saw him midweek in the Champions League getting starts. But when he locks down a role, KDB locks down a role, Bernardo wants a position, Savio, Doku, Grealish is playing really well at the start. Minutes are going to be limited. They're going to be rotational, so he's going to have to play really well. Often, wingers in their first season under Pep Guardiola take a little bit of time to bed into the system. That's not been the case with Savinho. He's straight in there, and he has made a good start. Let's go to Crystal Palace, who of course signed Eddie Nketiah for about £30 million. Crystal Palace themselves have made the definition of a slow start, and I'm not totally convinced with Glasner's use of Nketiah. Playing him as this second striker attacking midfield off of Mateta. And look, Mateta, back end of last season, was borderline unplayable, wasn't he? 12 of his 16 goals last season came under Oli Glasner in 13 games. Really impressive towards the back end of the season and fully warranted being the starting number 9 at the start of this campaign as well. But after we've seen him across the first 6 games of the season, should Eddie Nketiah be given a run out as the number 9 with Ismaila Sarr playing on the right-hand side? I think he probably should. It feels a little bit like Mateta is in the form pre-Glasner now, doesn't it? Which saw him score 14 goals in 86 games for the club. Now, I'm not saying Mateta should be permanently taken out the side. I actually like the idea of him and Nketiah working as a front two. But in terms of their form, right now, Palace, something's got to change. And for me, that would be to play Nketiah as the number 9, drop Mateta for a few games, and play Ismaila Sarr on the right. He hasn't scored a goal yet. It has been a slow start for Nketiah, but I still believe he'll score goals this season. Let's go to Max Kilman at West Ham, which was quite a big fee. It was on £40 million, wasn't it? And a lot of people were kind of laughing at that. I wasn't at the time. He's an excellent player, very, very consistent, starts nearly every minute of every game. In fact, he has started every minute of every game for West Ham this season. 3 Man of the Match awards in his first 3 games. He looked a really, really excellent signing, and I still think he's done okay. The issue is structural at West Ham. It's not just on Max Kilman. I'm almost tempted to put him in good start. But because West Ham as a unit have been so dysfunctional at the start of the season and conceded so many goals and chances, I'm going to drop him down to done okay. As soon as West Ham finds some form, I have no doubt he'll look an excellent signing, one of the most vital players in that side. He's a leader, he's excellent on the ball, and he's an out-and-out defender. For me, his biggest struggle this season has been finding a partner. You know, Todibo has been in and out the side, Mavropanos has struggled at times. Once they find a settled unit and some form, he's going to look much better, and he'll definitely be jumping up categories. Let's go to Taylor Harwood-Bellis. It's a bit of a slow start for him, but Southampton as a whole have been a bit of a slow start, haven't they? They've not been great in terms of the defensive cohesion. You know, he started 5 games. He's averaging 75 passes per 90 in the Premier League, by the way. That's Virgil van Dijk sort of numbers. Across the Championship season last year, he was completing nearly 100 passes per 90, so we know he's excellent on the ball, but his defensive now still needs some work. You think of the game against Manchester United, particularly for the 3rd goal where he comes off the bench. He's about 10 yards deeper than the rest of the line. That still needs some work, doesn't it? Because Southampton so far this season, the 4th worst defensive record in the league, so it's going to need some work. But all of these players down here have either got injury concerns, positional concerns, or ability concerns. I think Taylor Harwood-Bellis, contextually for Southampton, doesn't really. Let's go to Calafiori. I mean, he looks excellent, doesn't he? Unsurprisingly, the Arsenal system allows most players that come into it to look absolutely superb. He is a really, really functional player. We saw that against PSG, given that he operated as a right back for a large proportion of that game. Not something I was expecting to say. With Ben White's injury at the start of this campaign, him and Timber in particular, so good. just so good. Calafiori as well is becoming a real threat in the opposition box. Now, we saw those numbers from Bologna last year. His carry volume, his sort of XG chain volume were incredible for a centre-back. Created loads of chances, created and started loads of attacks, and that's happening again at Arsenal. He had the most involvements in moves ending in a shot of any player in that Arsenal side. Now, that is definitely something to watch, because from left back, he can step forward, drive with the ball, but he's also a great defender, you know. Most duels won in that game too. Really impressed by him. Yeah, he hasn't put a single foot wrong so far. I really like him. Let's go to Brighton, where we want to talk about Rutter, who, slowly been bedded into the side, hasn't he? It's been a difficult position to get into because João Pedro is so vital to how Brighton play. He scored 22 goals in his 44 appearances for the club. Mitoma is excellent. Adingra looks a constant threat. And Welbeck's like the undroppable man in the 9 role. So his minutes have been slightly limited. But with João Pedro being injured, that's vital for Brighton. Since he arrived at the club, he scored 9 match-winning goals, João Pedro. Rutter coming into the side and there not being a huge fall-off means for me he's done okay. He's not going to score loads of goals. We didn't see him score loads of goals at Leeds, did we, last season? This was a huge fee for a player who scored 6 goals in the Championship. But his creative numbers stood out then. 16 assists last season. I think the most open play chances created of any player in the division. And I think you are starting to see that. He leads the squad in terms of progressive passes into the penalty area in fairly limited minutes already. So lots of positive signs. I think he's done okay. Vlachodimos at Newcastle. I mean, it kind of has to be in that bottom tier. Not sure Newcastle totally wanted to make this move, but he's an able backup. It was obviously part of the Elliot Anderson deal, wasn't it? So I just don't see him playing many minutes. That leaves the brilliant Amadou Onana. I mean, at the start of the season, what more could this guy have done to prove that the 50 million euros was worth every penny? He's, of course, started all of Aston Villa's games so far this campaign. His partnership with Youri Tielemans, who is an absolute beast, by the way, one of the best players in the league right now, is perfect. His ground-eating abilities, his long legs that he manages to sort of stick out like a telescope to get involved in tackles, mean that Youri Tielemans' lack of pace in transition isn't highlighted as much. And you can really see this in the fact that he is the tackle and interception leader in this Aston Villa side. He's picking up over 5 per 90, which is massively up on his Everton numbers. Back to his sort of Ligue 1 days when he was this defensive beast. And I'm really surprised nobody else went for him other than Aston Villa. It's going to be a battle for Boubacar Kamara to come back into this side and get any minutes. But yeah, I really like him. I think Villa have done brilliant work getting this deal signed. At 22 years old, his future is crazy. Okay, so that was my list of each club's most expensive signing ranked so far this season. Bottom tier is a tough one because it's been so early, so little game time, but I want you to let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. I'll see you later.